This video is for Chapter 5, Lesson 4, Solving Proportions. It's basically a review of the last lesson, and as well as using your cross products again to solve a proportion. And I'm going to show you one other way, which will be using the multiplication property of equality. So we've got three different methods. You should already be familiar with method 1 and method 3. And you will be familiar with method 2 once I go over it. It is something that you did learn before when you were looking at one-step equations and solving for that variable. It's basically the same thing. All right, so our key idea is using those three different methods, either mental math, the multiplication property of equality, or cross products. So if we look at the first example, they want us to use multiplication. So this would be method 2. So if you think of this as an equation instead of as a proportion, you would think, how would I get x alone? Well, this is an equation that states x divided by 21. So how do we undo division in an equation to solve for the variable? We undo it by multiplying. So if I multiply both sides of this equation by 21, that would eliminate those 21s, leaving me with x. And what I do to one side, I must do to the other. Looking at that, I could use some cross-canceling here because 7 and 21 are both divisible by 7. 7 goes into 7 once and into 21 3 times. And now I could multiply across the top. 3 times 5 would give me 15 for x. So another way of doing it is using that multiplication property of equality. You're multiplying both sides of the equation by the number that is with your variable. In the second one, you've got w divided by 6. How do we undo dividing by 6? By multiplying by 6. These 6's cancel out, leaving me with w by itself. I draw my line. Since I multiplied by 6 on the left-hand side, I must multiply by 6 on the right as well. Keep it equal. That's why it's called the property of equality. Looking at the 6 and 9, they are both divisible by 3. 3 goes into 9 3 times and into 6 2 times. I then can multiply across the top. 6 times 2 is 12. And if you want to think of this as being over a 1, 3 times 1 on the bottom would be 3. You're left with an improper fraction there, so we're going to simplify that. 12 divided by 3 is simply 4. So w would be 4 there. And in the last one, we're trying to get rid of dividing by 15. So you would multiply both sides of the equation by 15 to get a alone. Over here, I'm multiplying by 15. 15 and 10 are diagonal to each other. They're both divisible by 5. 5 goes into 10 2 times and into 15 3 times. I then can multiply my numerators. 3 times 12 is 36. And if I want to think of this as being over a 1, 1 times 2 would give me 2. Again, I have an improper fraction. I'm going to simplify a. 36 divided by 2 is actually 18. And then remember, you can always go back and plug those numbers in and do your cross products to check. Your cross products should be the same if you solved it correctly. So that's method 2, multiplication property of equality, multiplying both sides of the equation by the number that the variable is being divided by. You're just basically solving for a division problem by using the inverse operation, which is always multiplication when we're talking about division. Just another way of doing it. Doesn't have to be the way that you go about doing it, because you could do your cross products, you could use your mental math. I'm teaching you different ways of doing the same thing. In example 2, they want you to practice using those cross products. So looking diagonal to each other, I've got 10x. I always like to start with the variable. I like to keep my variable on the left-hand side. And then 8 times 7 would give me 56. We set our cross products up equal to each other. I'm looking at a one-step equation now. How do I get rid of multiplying by 10? Doing its inverse here would be to divide both sides by 10. What I do to one side, I must do to the other. That leaves me with x, and 56 divided by 10 leaves me with 5 6/10. In part B, cross products again, starting with my variable, I've got 3y. And 9 times 17 would give me 153. 3y equals 153. To get y alone, I would have to divide both sides by 3. That leaves me with y. And 153 divided by 3 leaves me with 51. All right, so using your cross products, just another way of solving those proportions. On the next page, it says use the cross products property to solve the proportions. And if you feel comfortable doing it a different way, feel free. The one I will point out to you here is number 6, because you're going to pause the video and try this on your own in a sec. But notice that this says 15 times z plus 1 as your cross product. Now, we haven't done any like that. I want you to rewrite that as like you're distributing that 15. And then your other cross product on that side. And you should be able to distribute that 15. And when you do that, you're just going to be looking at a two-step equation, which you should be familiar with, and you should be able to solve at this point. So please pause the video now, try 4, 5, and 6 on your own, and then come back and check your answers. Since the directions does say cross products, that's what I'm going to be doing to show you so you can check your answers. I've got 7x here equals 2 times 28 would give me 56. To get rid of that 7 that's being multiplied by x, I divide both sides by 7 here. That leaves me with x equal to 8. 56 divided by 7 is 8. In the second one, cross products, I've got 12y. And 5 times 6 would be 30. To get rid of 12 times y, I'm going to divide both sides by 12. 12 divided by 12 leaves me with y. 30 divided by 12 leaves me with 2 and 5/10. Right, our first cross product in number 6 is 15 times z plus 1, and our second one is 40 times 60, which is 240. I'm then going to have you distribute 15. 15 times z is 15z. 15 times positive 1 is positive 15. And that's still equal to 240. In the two-step equation, we get rid of the addition or subtraction part first, or if you like to call it your fans first. We're going to subtract 15 from both sides. That will leave me with 15z over here. And 240 minus 15 leaves me with 225. I now have a one-step equation where I'm going to get z alone. I need to divide both sides by 15 now. 15 divided by 15 leaves me with z, and 225 divided by 15 leaves me with 15. All right, so even though that was a little bit more complicated, it's still doable. You just have to remember that you have to distribute that 15 there to get your cross products correct. In the next example, we've got a real-life application. It says the graph shows the toll Y due on a turnpike for driving X miles. Your toll is $7.50. How many kilometers did you drive? So it says the point 100, 7.5. On the x-axis, that 100 is your distance in miles. And that 7.5 on your y-axis is your toll dollars, so it's really $7.50. What we need to do here in order to answer this question is to convert those 100 miles that they're talking about into kilometers. That's all they're asking us to do. They want us, if you drove 100 miles, how many kilometers did you really drive? I'm going to show you two different methods of doing that. In order to convert, though, you need to know something about miles and kilometers. So that needs to be provided for you, or you'd have to look it up, because that's not really something that we have memorized going from one to another when we're talking about customary and metric. So in order for us to do this, we need to know that 1 mile is about equal to 1 61/100 kilometers. And I had to look that up myself. So that kind of information wouldn't have to be provided for you to do these types of problems. So we're going to do it in two different ways. We're either going to convert using a ratio or convert using a proportion, which I find to be a lot easier, especially since we're working with these proportions right now. So to convert using a ratio, my ratio, I'm going to take what we know about miles and kilometers, and I'm going to write it as a ratio. I know that 1 61/100 kilometers is about 1 mile. And since I want to convert 100 miles, I'm going to multiply that by 100 miles. And by doing that, since I have miles diagonally to each other, they cancel out, and that would leave me with 1 unit left, which would be kilometers, which would be our answer. So I have 100 times 1 and 61 hundredths, which ends up being 161, over 1 at the bottom, which we don't even have to worry about, because whenever we divide by 1, it keeps it the same. And the only unit left that I have is kilometers, which is what I needed, because that's what they want me to convert to. Alright, so that's one way, writing a ratio and using multiplication. The second way, which is going to give us the same answer, is by using a proportion. So again, I know that 1 and 61 hundredths kilometers is approximately 1 mile. And I'm converting 100 miles. So think to yourself, where would I put the 100 miles? Where does it match up to miles in my first ratio? It matches up on the bottom, because remember, with proportions, your units must match. And we are looking for x, which is going to be kilometers, which is what we have on top in my first ratio. I can then do cross products. 1 times x, 1x. And 1 and 61 hundredths times 100 is 161. Dividing both sides by 1 still leaves me with 161. What's up top here? Kilometers to match my other. So it's 161 kilometers. Right, I'd like you to solve using proportions, since that's what we're practicing right now. So if you look at the on your own problems, I did give you the information that is needed for each one. That should be the information that you're using to set up your first ratio. And your second ratio is going to come from the unit that they gave you. So I'll help you set up number 7 first before I set you off on your own. Since I know that 1 inch, and these equal signs should actually be about equal to each other. They're not exact, they are rounded off, because it's a really long decimal when these come out. So I couldn't, instead of writing the about equal sign, I did put equal in the computer, but it should say about equal to each other. So I could set this up. I could write 1 inch is 2 and 54 hundredths centimeters. And notice that I'm writing my units in, because I want to make sure that I match my units up. The other part that I have is 7 and 5/10 inches. I notice that inches are on top. So my 7 and 5/10 inches should be on the top as well, giving me my x centimeters on the bottom. Now, if you wrote it as 2 and 54 hundredths centimeters is to 1 inch. Now where would your 7.5 inches go? Now they would go on the bottom. But please notice that your cross products are still the exact same. So it doesn't matter which way you do it, as long as you are lining up those units correctly. So I'm going to ask that you pause the video now, work on 7, 8, 9, and 10, and then come back and check your answers when you're done. So I'm going to go with the one that I set up in red for number 7. And notice in the directions it does say to round to the nearest hundredth if necessary. So if you end up with a really long answer, you can always round it off to the nearest hundredth. So my cross products here, I've got 1x, and I've got 2 and 54 hundredths times 7 and 5/10, and that leaves me with 19 and 5 hundredths. My answer on the bottom, look for my unit, would be centimeters. Now I can get rid of that 1 if you want. You're just dividing by 1 on both sides. That still leaves you with just simply x equal to 19 and 5 hundredths centimeters. Right, whenever you divide by 1, the numbers stay the same. In number 8, setting it up, I'm looking at the information that they gave me. They told me that 1 gram is about equal to 35,000 ounces. And then if I look at the other information I have 100 grams. So where am I going to put that 100 grams? I'm going to put grams up top, because grams were up top in my first ratio. And I'm going to be looking for ounces on the bottom. Cross products here, again, I have 1x. And 35 thousandths times 100 leaves me with 3 and 5/10. If you want to divide both sides by 1 to get x alone, even though it really is already alone, we already know 1x equals 3 and 5/10. I know that on the bottom is ounces, therefore my answer needs to be in ounces. In number 9, they're telling me that 1 liter is about equal to 1 600 quarts. So I can set it up as 1 liter over 1 and 6/100 quart, equal to, the other information they gave me was liters, so I must put that up top, and I'm looking for X quarts here. Doing my cross products, I've got 1 times X again, and 1 6/100 times 2 would leave me with 2 12/100, and my unit on the bottom is going to be quarts. Again, you can get rid of that 1 by dividing both sides by 1, but it does not change your answer. And in the last one, they're telling me that 1 meter is about equal to 3 28/100 feet. They gave me 4 meters. I'm going to match up my units. 4 meters should be on top because meters was on the top of my first ratio. I'm looking for X feet. Cross products would be 1X, and 4 times 3 28/100 leaves me with 13 12/100. My unit on the bottom is feet. Right, so that's the end of that lesson. Again, just basic review of solving proportions, and you've got 3 ways to go about doing that. If you want to use your mental math, if you want to use your cross products, or if you want to use that multiplication property of equality, which we went over in example 1. Just another way of going about solving proportions.